Other aspect that we want to cover is control and regulation. So when we're talking about being involved, we're saying that it's the mind which dictates and determines the activity. So what is this graph here? This is from one of our other books, The Fall of the Human Intellect. The example we use every single time is mango season in India. Okay, so for say 9 months of the year, no mangoes, and then in the heat of summer, the trees just burst with these beautiful mangoes, right? You take your first Alfonso mango, after 9 months of abstinence, what's it like? Fantastic, glorious, wonderful. That's this point here. Maximum pleasure. That's the maximum pleasure you can get out of a mango because you've had this period of abstinence, forced abstinence. So you finish off your mango, you wipe the juice off your hands and your mouth and everything else, and you change your shirts because of course you've dripped it all the way down. And you walk around the corner and your friend walks up to you and says, "Hey, I know what you like. Here, have a mango." And you're like, okay, he's so excited to be giving me the first mango of the season, I'll take it. And you eat it. What's it like?
Good.
It's good. It's really good. But it's not fantastic. It's not wow. It's this one here. It's slightly less. Then you go to your friend's place and their 5-year-old daughter says, Uncle, have a mango. And of course you have to eat the mango because she just gave you the mango. What's it like? Slightly less. 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th mango. At some point you put the mango in your mouth and you get zero enjoyment out of it. Tongue is the same, mango is the same, enjoyment is zero. This is the first aspect of what we call neutralization. The second aspect of neutralization is the real kicker. Not only do we get no pleasure out of the object, but if we are without the object, intense dissatisfaction. And so we have to keep contacting it just to keep the dissatisfaction at bay, just to keep ourselves at zero. This is addiction. You talk to I asked this question to a friend of mine who used to be a chain smoker. Not a proper chain smoker, not like lighting one to the next all day, but he was smoking a lot of cigarettes. And I said to him once, he'd just finished a cigarette, maybe 5 minutes earlier or whatever, started up another one. I said, "Are you enjoying that cigarette?" And he looked at it. He looked at me and said, "Well, no, not really." This is proper neutralization. Not only do we get no joy when we contact the object, but when we're without the object, it's extremely unpleasant. We're uncomfortable. We can't function properly. We can become neutralized to anything. The example that's often given up, I'm not sure if it's in the book or not, he says you get neutralized to your eyesight. No one here is gaining joy from their eyesight right now. But imagine that you got dust in your eyes, or you had contracted a condition where for 6 months you couldn't see. Eyes were covered over or whatever it happened to be. Extremely unpleasant to be without your eyesight. And then what happens after 6 months? The bandages come off and you open your eyes, and what do you see in front of you? You see a trash bin with a used tissue on the floor next to it. It's the most beautiful sight you've ever seen in your life. To be without sight for that long and then to suddenly see that disgusting scene, my God, the beauty of the world revealed to me in a trash bin. So, of course, we quickly get neutralized again. So we can get neutralized to anything, including our partners, including our children. So the idea of moderation and regulation is that when we indiscriminately contact, what that means is that whenever the mind says, go contact, and I do it, it's like having mango after mango after mango. And the joy that I get from contacting my spouse diminishes over time. But the thought that she's away from me and I can't contact her. You got your phone? Take your phone now. To not be able to contact is a sense of being very uncomfortable there. So, the cause of neutralization is indiscriminate contact, which means that the mind alone dictates contact. And it doesn't just have to be a physical contact, that's an obvious one, but hey, something happens at your workplace. Some employee finally had enough, he's fed up, you've seen those videos, he throws his computer out the window or something, storms out of the building. And the first thing you think is, get my phone and text my wife, guess what just happened at work? Da, 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 da. Now, there's nothing wrong with texting your wife and explaining what just happened in your workplace. But the point is that what is determining that contact? Mind's impulse comes up. Bang, eye contact. And that pleasure that you get from that interaction, it's immediate and you get it there. Do I have to contact her now? Do I have to make this connection right now? Why am I not? And again, it's not that we belabor every activity that we have, but just that awareness that the impulse functions, you gain the satisfaction, and it's gradually decreasing. The solution, of course, is, as the title suggests, control and regulation. So indulgence is what destroys our enjoyment. So, all through these old philosophical texts, they discuss these sorts of ideas. It's been wrongly understood as stay away from the contact. And so we get all sorts of twisted ideas of what abstinence is, for example. It's not the contact that is problematic. You can contact anything as much as you want. What's problematic is the indulgence, the mind alone dictating the activity. So as a practice, it simply means now or later. Do I need this right now? Am I going to contact the person right now? Or, well, I'm going to see my wife in about 4 hours' time. I'll talk to her then. You know that if you've got a basket of mangoes at home and you eat them all in one go, you're going to get this sudden drop in pleasure. 1 mango a day. You maximize your mango pleasure. So too with contact with your partner. Whether it's physical contact, emotional contact, intellectual contact. The more you spread that contact out, you're maintaining the maximum enjoyment of the relationship. It's important that we understand that this is not suppression, of course. This is a discussion of what is a healthy way to relate. It can become suppression if we don't do it intelligently. But the point is that the intellect asking these questions, do I need it now? Can I have it later? If so, then later is good.
Yeah. So is this similar to, the more you use your mind, the mind gets stronger, the more you use your intellect, the intellect gets stronger. In this practice, if let's say you do something and you constantly contact it and do it, but it's harmless, it being take a sip from water, or a juice, it's harmless and you keep doing it. The more you practice not contacting it, makes you stronger not to indulge in things that will impact your life, perhaps.
So let me see if I'm getting the question right. So you're saying if there's a contact where it's not problematic for you, you're not indulging, you're not so on and so forth. If you practice control and regulation there, will I be able to then enhance my ability to control and regulate in other areas where maybe there is sometimes
that are more difficult?
Yes, correct. It becomes a habit that you can get good at by practicing it here. Okay. It doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be able to practice it in the difficult area. Okay. What will enable you to practice in the difficult area is gaining intellectual strength through knowledge. So if you're doing it in this area where it's relatively easy, and your emphasis is, I'm doing this because I know that indiscriminate contact leads to neutralization, control and regulation, when done in a healthy way, sustains my enjoyment, so I'm just practicing it here, then that will bring that habitual way of thinking into your other areas of life. In the same way that if you indulge in one area of life, it will make it easier for you to indulge in all the other areas of life. So it's false to say, for example, I only indulge when it comes to drinking. But in my other areas of life, I don't. I leave all my indulgence at alcohol. It's not going to work. If I become an indulgent person in that level of the personality, it'll bleed into other areas of life too. Okay. There's a great quote I've heard, I think it was attributed to a Buddhist thinker, I don't know if it's true. He says there's nothing wrong with drinking wine and eating meat, but there may be benefits from abstaining. But there may be benefits from abstaining. So the idea there is that, as you pointed out, okay, this is an innocuous behaviour. There's nothing wrong with having a glass of wine occasionally and eating meat, although don't tell that to the animals or to the greenhouse gas emissions. This was written many years ago. But you may decide that, despite the fact that this activity is relatively innocuous, I might use this as an area of my life where I'm going to practice moderation and regulation. So there's nothing wrong with having a glass of wine every night, but I'm just going to practice having one only every second night. Why? Because I like practicing. It's good for me to practice. It's good for me to keep that thought in my head of regulation, moderation. It's sort of back to what you were saying earlier, or the question that you asked earlier. And if I go back to once a day, fine, there's no problem with that either. It's just a practice that I might put in to keep these sorts of ideas fresh in my mind.
Okay. So in this example, if let's say you had access to mangoes at any time, but you said, okay, I'm going to fast from mangoes for 3 months. So that experience would be just as strong the first time you had one, because you through your own willpower you said, no, I'm not going to eat them for 3 months, not through 9 months where the other factor is outside of your control. You don't have a choice.
Correct.
But in this instance, you have a choice. So you're building your intellect to say no, and then when you decide to have it, the rewards are just as
The
good.
reward is, and every time you contact it, you get maximum reward. Every time, because you know the appropriate length of time to have between contact, and so you get maximum. So instead of the graph going like this, it's like this.
So it's a twofold benefit. It's a benefit that you're building your intellect, but then you're also going to enjoy whatever thing you're fasting from.
So I wouldn't say that the control and regulation itself builds the intellect. That's using your existing intellectual strength. It's like if you go to the gym, you build your body and you can use that everywhere you go. So you take that strength with you when you're carrying your groceries and walking up the stairs. These things are not necessarily building your strength, carrying groceries and walking stairs. You're using the existing strength for that activity, but you build the strength every morning when you go to the gym and do squats and deadlifts and everything else. That's where you build the strength in the gymnasium. So too, the building of the intellectual strength happens in the morning. You take your philosophical text and you question, you study, you reflect, you think about it. That's building the intellectual strength. And then you take that with you into your relationship with your parents and your spouse and your kids and everything else. So those relationships where you apply it, it'll be helping to keep it active in the same way that carrying your groceries instead of getting someone else to do it will help to keep your body active. But it won't necessarily be building the strength. That's really being done in the intellectual gymnasium. But there's still a twofold benefit, yeah.
Isn't it really subjective on where you might have less pleasure on something?
Yes.
And then would it make sense to do these practices based on when you see the pleasure dropping versus just doing it anyway? So an example is if I really love eating 10 mangoes a day, and by the time I get to the 11th, maybe I practice, but somebody else may stop loving at 3.
Yeah, it's a great point. If it was as simple as being objective, then it'd be great. We could just publish a book of how often to have mangoes and how often to have sex and how often to have alcohol and how often to have whatever. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. The appropriate amount of contact for you is specific to you. And so your own intellect has to determine what is effective, healthy control and regulation for me, for this particular object, whether the object is a mango or a wife. So yes, it's totally subjective, and this is where your own independent thinking and independent self-reflection has to be done to make sure you find that spot.
And it could be very practical, right? Some people in a relationship, they work together, they live together, and they seem to have a great time doing that.
Yep.
Versus somebody else trying to do the same thing,
That's right.
It would just fall apart.
Yeah, so one couple needs more space, another couple doesn't need as much space. So yeah, it's different for everybody. The problem, I'll look in a sec, but the problem arises, of course, that when you have a basket of mangoes, the mango doesn't care whether you eat it or not. But when you have another person, you might say, well, I'm self-sufficient, I will contact once a week. What if your wife needs to contact twice as often, or needs to contact half as often? Then you get the difficulty, which again needs to be resolved. So.
And in his example, once you define where your level is, and that level, let's say, is 4 mangoes a day, should there be a goal to keep reducing it to 1 mango a day, or at what point will one determine that's the right level that is adequate?
It depends. I mean, you think of it in terms of your obligations, all right? So what's my obligation to my body? What's my obligation to my mind? What's my obligation to my intellect? So what's my obligation to me? What are my needs? You find what that window is. The idea then of whether or not I reduce it is to say, well then why would I reduce it? What would be the purpose of reducing the frequency of contact? And if you have a legitimate reason why that is going to be useful, then by all means go ahead. If not, if it doesn't serve a particular goal that you've set for yourself, then there's no particular reason to.
So it comes down again to use your intellect.
Use your intellect to discover for yourself what your own needs are, and direct that towards your enhanced well-being, continued growth. The other aspect in terms of control and regulation is to offer what you have as a gift. We often think of contact as something I'm doing to get for myself, but of course there's another person involved. When I text my wife, when I have any sort of contact with her, hopefully, presumably, she also wants to contact with me. So it's something that I can now offer. And so if we think of our contact with other individuals, whether it's spouse, children, etc., when we think of it as I'm giving this to the person as a gift, that also gives us pause, because it makes us often think, do they want it? Do they need it? So to turn the attention around, because again, what's disturbing us is the egocentric demand to give it to me. The moment you think of your contact with another human being as a gift to them, all of a sudden you've stopped it from being I'm getting to I'm giving. And so that demand that we are experiencing just calms down a little bit. And of course, obligation. It's your obligation to contact your spouse. It's your obligation to contact your parents, to contact your kids in various ways.